Okay, right now we're going to look at World Builder and OpenArt AI. It's a tool that's aimed at solving a problem that we all have, which is environmental consistency. My task was for a project that I'm working on, which is the Golem of Prague. And what I was doing here was creating a narrow street which was meant to feel quite claustrophobic. It meant to feel very tall in terms of its architecture because in that period of time it was a very dense populous area with a lot of very tall stacks of buildings that were sort of built on top of each other. In some cases it was very difficult to get a feeling of the buildings leaning into each other. They would almost have actually blocked out portions of the sky and almost touched each other at the very top of the building structures. And also then I tried to explore building a courtyard environment in World Builder, which wasn't really working for me for a couple of reasons, but I can see a lot of promise for something that I'll get into. If we look at the environments that I created, the main issue that I was experiencing was that these were very dark environments. So we're going to open one up and load one so you can have a look and see what it looks like. In fact, that's already done that. This is a 3D image view that it gives you as part of a preview, just so it can get your approval on how it's going to look. And this was going to be the street, I believe, that I was going to use. If we go to my library, so this is a world draft is what it's called. And then if we go to a 3D world that's been created based on that draft, you can see it's kind of got this sort of point map preview before it sort of reconstructs it for you based on the images you provided. And we'll get into how that's made as well. So it didn't really work for this example because, as I mentioned, it was meant to feel very claustrophobic. It was meant to feel like the sky is meant to be quite diffuse or hazy. There's not meant to be, that feels like, very early morning or dusk. The modern kind of style of buildings, it put in this very brightly lit building on the other edge of, or end of the environment. Some of the stuff here is really cool. For instance, it does let me, if I hold down shift, it uses the WASD keys to fly around, much like you do in gaming. So I can go in here and get a nice alleyway shot or a tunnel shot from in here. I can navigate lower. I can't remember what buttons do that, Q and E. You've got a little box here which gives you all of the commands that you can use, or you can take shots. Now the way it looks here is very sort of CG 3D as a base, but then if I take a shot here from this angle, it should hopefully auto-enhance the shots, and you can describe the scene and add characters. So you can actually put characters into the scene. But I might prefer just to have the environment and put the characters in later on myself. So let's grab that one. It looks like it gives you a number of different options for the lens. So we're going to go to a 50, and that's sort of the most representative of what your human eye does. 50. Your human eye is basically a 50mm lens. I'm not entirely sure. This is the first time I've actually done this, but I'm not entirely sure why it's sort of grayed out the outside of this image, but we're going to find out soon. So if I want to go a little bit into the corner here, come down a little bit and grab an angle like this. So let's say I'm a mouse and I take the shot. Let's have a look at what happens there. So it's queued it, so it's rendering an image from that. So I tried a basic prompt here: 16th century Bohemian Prague street, diffuse cloud, sky, nighttime, moonlit, no moon. Because I actually really hate it when you say it's, it's a moonlit night and then it just pops a massive moon in the background for you, and then anytime you change that angle and it's still a moonlit night, it just an image model will just keep popping a moon into every single angle that you go to, which means that you lose consistency of you lose your continuity. So let's try that. So it's going to cue another one. So to me, it doesn't. Okay, so it looks like it's a little bit improved, but it still feels very much like the same kind of quality here. It is a little bit improved. What I'd probably end up doing here is taking, let's say I get an angle that I'm quite happy with, I might actually just take that shot, pop it into Nano Banana Pro, which has creative outputs, and get it to redress the scene and environment to maybe what I want. Maybe that's a workaround that I'm looking for. Maybe that's something that I might play with. Here with the prompt, but it's nice to be able to have a bit of control to say it's darkened it, it's put a bit of cloud cover in there, it says it's moonlit, but to me that still feels like dusk or early morning. Definitely doesn't give me that winter feel because the winter sky, especially at nighttime, will just be this kind of blanket of, it looks almost like fog in the sky. It's just you can't really tell where it begins, where it ends. There's no real texture to it. These clouds are a little bit too textured. Let's have a little fly around and get another angle. I was exploring, I have to hold down the shift button. I was exploring angles from like, what if the thugs were hiding under the staircase here? What if they were, you could get a couple of interesting kind of point of view shots. But this is part of the problem with World Builder, is because it takes reference images. Let's say I have 4 angles of a street. From the center of the street, it only rebuilds, not necessarily like a 3D model, like it doesn't actually model everything in 3D. It does something that I've referred to before as a Gaussian splat. So you have great detail on what's in the picture, but anything behind the picture in the 3D space, it falls apart. Supposedly, it's meant to fix that. So if I take this snapshot at the cost of another 30 credits, hopefully it will have fixed that or done something to address this problem here. But for example, if I wanted an angle here, a point of view, right, a POV shot, and you had the couple coming out of this corner, turning the corner, or turning that corner, going that direction, then I'd be able to introduce the thugs from the reverse and show where they're coming from. So if I then sort of fiddle around and of course I can't use that angle because it's hallucinated, this very bright yellow building here, which looks like some weird pyramid construction. But there are other angles of streets and other areas to explore. If you wanted your sort of saloon style cowboy sort of shot, you could get a point of view from up here. Let's go higher. So let's have a look at that POV shot that we may or may not have created here. It doesn't quite look like it was taken from underneath the staircase, and it doesn't quite look like it resembles that angle specifically that I chose. So that's kind of odd and a little bit worrisome. Instead of fixing or reconstructing it, it actually removed it and added some staircase over here, which, however, what I'm going to say is that as an actual geo shot, that looks pretty nice. I could probably even use that. I'm not actually upset with that particular environment. So it's interesting. What I'm going to do is go into the library of the worlds that are provided as samples for you to play around with in OpenArt. And this one, so I think that there's a great potential for interiors, particularly for like a little anime idea that I had where I'd need to reconstruct a bedroom for a character. But if I went here and I wanted two people talking to each other on a couch, the model will fix up the blurry stuff. Again, that's because the environment was probably created from a central point of view. So anything that was considered not from a certain angle is probably, or maybe it was taken from, you know, sort of exterior points of view. But, you know, if I wanted a character sitting on this couch and I wanted to take that shot, let's have a look at how that looks. Hopefully that'll fix it up. And let's widen, well, no, let's get closer, because essentially this would be, the intention would be to get a close-up on someone chatting here from this angle. So if that's oh, that's right. I can go up or down. Ooh, that's quite a long lens. So let's have a look at that one. And then if I wanted the reverse angle, essentially of that shot, looking the other way to the other person talking, something like that, maybe a little higher. Maybe this person's a little bit taller. So we'd get this angle here, and then hopefully it means that when you prompt a close-up shot, you'll get like a nice portrait frame of that person facing us talking. So you can get your over the shot. Actually, that's an interesting one. So if I take that shot as well, so that gives you the looking at one character, then something referred to as the reverse angle, where you would imagine, you know, you have an A camera on one side and a B camera on the other side. And that's what we refer to as coverage. So you're covered for all your angles. Now, let's say I wanted an over the shoulder of you know, I want to be looking over the shoulder of one character onto another. You'd come back behind the couch, and that's something that we call dirty framing as well, because they're dirty. They're out of focus in the foreground person, and looking towards the other person, and you know, each one of these things has a different meaning in composition. What I quite enjoyed was exploring high angles, which are unusual in AI generated stuff that I've seen. So if we go to let's go 50 again, or even 35 is usually better for portraits, but you can see how it's starting to warp the thing into a fisheye, like a fish bowl or a magnifying glass, and then it starts to normalize, and that's sort of a little bit more natural to what we would see as a human eye. I don't mind that on a 35 actually. Then you could get a nice shot, sort of tracking that person walking down between all the people, and then have the camera kind of continue that shot as that person then approaches the main desk to check in. And then let's say, here's an interesting angle as well. If we go higher, let's go back to a 50, let's say. Again, it doesn't really matter whether you're technical, just it all comes down to your personal preference and your personal choice and how you want this stuff covered. But you know, what you could end up doing is, if I had the detail in the shot, what you could end up doing is have, let's say, so in this case I would have to go wider for the shot that I'm about to explain. So let's go on a 35, or even wider, maybe not. But what you'd have is, yeah, I'd need more detail at this balcony. So what you could have is something that's a little bit high up and a little bit off to the side. But you could, for instance, just be here and introduce someone walking in to the frame here. So you're setting up like a mysterious entity. Maybe this is a villain, maybe this is a character that's going to then interact with whoever's coming through the door. So let's have a look at what the screen captures have given us, and that actually looks really nice. Again, I think it's hallucinated a background here, which is a problem. So it's taken some creative liberties here, because I believe that was meant to be where the front desk was. So I guess here, that's not bad. As you can see, it's given us a little bit of depth of field or blur in the background, I don't remember seeing pillows in the environment. Were there pillows? Let's have a look. Oh yeah, there's the pink pillow there. It's even got that little crease there. That's a really cool render. It's put the fabric on there and everything. So that's kind of nice. I don't mind that at all. I'm not sure what that device is there. Very cool. Aside from the fact that that was meant to be a front desk and that railing goes nowhere. So let's have a look at the settings and what it takes to create a world. I'm running super low on credits at the moment because I've just I've spent a lot. You can essentially create, you can create by describing a world. So you can, if you have a very detailed description of a world, you can create one just from pure text. And you've got some prompt samples here. The prompt samples are just a guide. They're very super simple. If you want something generic, that's fine. But if you need something that's very specific and detailed, you're going to have to make your prompt specific and detailed. I think more detail is better. As you can see, it costs a fair whack of credits, and it says here estimated time about 5 minutes. And luckily, you can get a 3D panorama of the environment before you lock it in. So it does give you the ability to preview it. Alternatively, you can create it from an image, and this is interesting because this one took a bit of fiddling for me. So if you create with an image, you can give it one reference image and a prompt, right? But so if I move that, can I move that? No. So let's cancel that. So here it is. So you can start by feeding it, let's say, your hero environment, to say this is essentially what I want the environment to look like, and then add details to your image, beyond what's in the image. So you can then say I want street vendors on the other side of the street, and so that's all really cool. But as soon as you add more than one image, you lose the ability to prompt. So any more than one image, and you can't add text to reinforce your image. So there you go. So text input is not available when using more than one image, and that can be fine, because if you've basically got the 4 angles that you're happy with, it'll reconstruct that. Just be aware that it might be a lot wider than your expectation was. Like the claustrophobic street that I wanted ended up becoming a big boulevard, and it lost a lot of detail in the road itself. It made it very muddy and not very well. Yeah, so here it's just a mud street, looks like gravel. It doesn't actually have it as a cobblestone street. Although, to be fair, maybe in that time period, it probably would have just been a cobblestone street. A muddy street. I fed it some courtyard references for a scene that I was working on, and there's been a couple of issues. It's very dark, so creating a world from something that's this dark will give you very little detail. And it won't really understand what's down here. The other thing is that it takes a certain point of view that I have no control over. So I wanted the camera to be positioned inside the courtyard, because as soon as I'm in a tunnel like this or an environment here, it's treating this as the center of the environment. And if I'm centered inside a tunnel, then I'm going to have no detail in the courtyard. And that's a bit of a problem. This is interesting. It gives you a little area to edit, so you can probably draw a thing and just say change that to, maybe I should have done that for that weird illuminated building there. So that's kind of interesting. Let's see what it does here with 3D world panorama. Okay. But mainly the issue I have here is that it's too dark even for me to see what's going on with this environment. So let's go to another one. This one, kind of interesting. I think this is where I actually fed it some decent references, but it wasn't quite right for some reason. I think this was the main issue, is you got this sort of half cobbled, half puddled kind of environment. It didn't quite feel right for me to have all these reflections down here. That was the main problem, is that it added all of this weird geometry up here. It looks like there's some weird construction that we're underneath, and I'm not sure. Let's take a photo of it anyway, and let's see if the model. Oh no, I can't, because I'd have to create the world. So my test, which I should do, but I don't have the credits to be able to create a 3D world from here now, is if I were to take a snapshot of that, would the model clean that up and remove it? Otherwise, I probably, you know what, if taking the snapshot fixed this rubbish, this hallucination, then I probably would be happy to use this environment. And maybe when my credits refresh, I will test that as a follow-up. Because that environment, I think, was fine, except I couldn't risk having this rubbish in here. But that's good, because what it's done here is it shows me that this is the stitch point. This is where the camera first loads, and maybe it would clean that up in the world. I just don't know. Okay, so because I wasn't quite getting this right, and it's maybe not necessarily a problem with the world builder itself. I think there were a couple of challenges. First, with the street being a boulevard and not being able to adhere to the kind of environment that I wanted. You can work around that kind of thing with trick photography, let's say. But I wasn't confident that I would get the environment that I wanted. So I ended up going into the old way of doing it, which is to go into Nano Banana, and I spammed the shit out of various street environments to see if I can get, just through describing the various angles that I needed. So that's a lovely angle of the courtyard that I am using. Here's another one which I think I went with because I needed a dark sort of tunnel here, another one here, and that all seems fairly consistent with the courtyard that we have. So I have decent coverage of that environment, which I can then play with. Because there is another way of working with environments, is if you get a fairly, call it wide, 3/4 angle, or just a wide environment, the model can, depending on which model, the model can actually just interpret a push in, so long as you're able to accurately prompt and describe the location of the characters, where they are relative to the environment. And you can kind of get stuff that's not necessarily locked in too much to the environment. But for the courtyard, I was able to get a kind of an environment that was working enough to build the scene that I'm working on. So I'm going to jump back into the alleyway environment for a moment, because what I found as well with this kind of, you can see from the point map, where all the points are building the geography or the environment, it's going to fall over anytime you have like a curve in a road, because it's only building what it can see. As soon as you go to a place that you can't see, if I speed up and go here, you'll see that it's got very little detail. I'm not really sure what it's trying to put in there. What is that? I mean, it's kind of cool, but who knows. So if you need winding streets that weave and kind of confuse you, like you have in places like Malta or the Medinas of Morocco, and that's something that I couldn't get from a world model, but that's the least of the problems that I have. So let's come back to a couple of shots that I was able to generate using some of those Nano Banana angles that I created. And if I find the shot where Rivka comes running out of the street there, you can see that that's that nice sort of front angle of the courtyard that I put in there. I think if you've seen one of my earlier ones, my earlier videos, you'll see this is the stalking shot, which closes off this beat, and we're going to go into the beat where they run down the little alleyway and they come in. She comes out running, she gets grabbed, Yakov comes to rescue her, he gets knocked to the ground, thugs pick him up, and then the scene kind of continues. I've got a couple of takes of that. And then, yeah, so here, again, I'm using that same wide angle, but as you can see, that I was able to actually interpret a push-in on that. So even if you have a slightly wider environment, you can actually get a close-up angle of something that's in that space. So that's an interesting kind of trick. Here you can see it's, yeah, you can see we're not as wide as the environment that we saw in Nano Banana. The Nano Banana goes much wider, so it's kind of good. So coming back to World Builder, look, would I use it again? I think I would, and I'm going to. I want to use this because I think it's an unlock to a problem that I'm having, and I think that there is tremendous potential in being able to actually get traditional camera setups and stuff. I think that there's a lot of utility in that. Combine that with, let's say, punching wide on something, grabbing a wide environment as well. So you have the combination of control in your close-ups, in your mid-shots, and then punch wide and you let the model interpret that how it needs to. I think that there is a use case for this. I was maybe a little bit apprehensive about some of the environments that I had. I didn't want to spend too many credits on things that seemed wrong to me, but from other examples of other worlds that they've given us in their library. Let's have a look at the Enchanted Forest Treehouse Library. I mean, that's pretty cool. I think that there's, this is a nice little set. So, this is really cool. This is a nice little set, and combine this with the fact that even once you've taken your shots, you could probably even then just take that image that you've captured because you like the angle and you kind of like most of it, but you want to fix up the tree detail, or make it a dark, haunted, spooky forest, or change the time of day or whatever. You can then take that into Nano Banana and redress it however you need. I see that as a possibility. Another thing I should mention is this is a really late night decision, and I did something a little bit silly. Is I did buy a yearly subscription to OpenArt, and I don't mind that because I do like the interface and I'm gonna keep playing with it, but I broke my own rule. I should only really just be doing things month by month, and I think it's too late to sort of try and refund it. But does it justify the yearly subscription? So what I'm finding actually is interesting. I don't think it really matters what the tools are on any platform, like this Director or Smart Shot or World Builder or whatever. I think you can end up deriving everything manually. The most basic tools and functions still work best, and a lot of the power users that you'll see use very, very simple techniques to make shots and make products and genuinely do things that astonish even me in terms of quality and just really awesome compositions and shots. And then a lot of them aren't really using this kind of stuff. So long as you have access to the model and all of the ingredient types that you need to make the shot, I think you can create anything. It's like, if you're a good photographer, you can take a shot on anything from a phone to to a professional grade camera, because it doesn't always come down to the tool that you're using. It comes down to your eye and your ability to capture a story within an image. And I think that that's the important thing here is, your personal taste and your ability to find what's important in a story through visual storytelling and composition. So I'm going to leave it there for this video. Hope you liked it. Hope that you found some value in it. If you did, please give us a like, subscribe if you want to. Really appreciate you being here, and hopefully my next one, I'm hoping I'll give you a lot more value in something that I think is the secret sauce to prompting. I've been fiddling around, and it's a step that I have been fumbling my way around, but I think I've finally unlocked the secret sauce to prompt architecture, which I'll get into in another one.